Okay, I've been following with great interest concerns that the Ukrainian community have about the way that Russian crude oil leaves Russia, is refined in places like India, and then makes it to other parts of the world like Australia, despite the fact that Russian oil has been sanctioned and banned, if you like. But clearly there are, as Andrew Wilkie said, he described it, the independent MP, of course, in Tasmania, but described it in the federal parliament the other day as a loophole that needs to be closed up. There's an organisation called the Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air, and the EU Russia analyst at the centre is Vaibhav Raghunandan, and he joins me on the line. Thanks very much for joining us.
Yes, thanks a lot for having me on.
Pleasure. All right, how long have you been looking into this issue of the way that Russian oil is being moved around the world?
We've been looking at how Russian oil is moved around the world right from the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Our organization essentially tracks emissions and promotes and does research on clean energy alternatives. But after the full-scale invasion, our team was specifically set up to track Russian fossil fuel flows, Russian revenues from fossil fuels. And we've been doing this for then over 3 years now.
And how big, in terms of sending money back to the Kremlin via crude oil, how big a business is it for Russia?
Well, about 30% of the Russian federal budget is from revenues from oil and gas, of which 80% is oil. So Russian oil forms a huge part of the way that they finance the military and finance the invasion of Ukraine. We actually have a website called RussiaFossilTracker.com, in which we track Russian revenues from fossil fuel sales since the invasion. And by our accounts, oil is 68% of the revenue they've earned since the invasion. It's, the entire revenue is almost reaching 1 trillion euros. So it is a significant amount.
So Vaibhav, when you see that, countries like Australia want to stand with Ukraine against the invasion by Russia, and they say, we will sanction crude oil, we will sanction their oil, is that nothing but a tokenistic thing to say by our government if they're not actually following through on making sure that the mechanisms for it moving around the world aren't being exploited?
There's two aspects to this. Obviously, there are sanctions in place for the direct import of Russian crude. In addition, Australia is also one of the founding members of what is called the Price Cap Coalition, in which case Australian maritime transport, when used to transport Russian oil, means that the oil has to be traded under the price cap. But there exists a giant loophole in these sanctions, which essentially means that Russian crude can go to different countries that do not impose sanctions, be refined into different products like diesel and gasoline, and are subsequently imported by, say, Australia. And this is a significant loophole even in terms of revenue for Russia, because this means that they can sell their oil for higher prices and significant volumes to willing new buyers. And subsequently, Australia is importing products made from Russian crude. By our estimates, since the price caps, which is in February 2023 till the end of June this year, Australia has imported $6.4 billion worth of oil products from refineries using Russian crude.
So how difficult would it be, though, for our government to look into further the whole supply chain of the oil that arrives, or the petroleum that arrives, as one has today, called the Zephyrus, which has come via India and a particular refinery? How hard would it be for our government to look into that supply chain?
Well, I would presume it wouldn't be too hard. We're a small team of five people, 5 researchers based in different countries in Europe, and we are able to do this. So my assumption is that governments with their bigger budgets, with greater manpower, and with genuine desire for people to actually work on it, would be able to do it. At the same time, the EU has imposed sanctions on this sort of import and this sort of oil trade recently. So there's no reason that other jurisdictions cannot do it too.
So the EU, as you said, they are bringing in sanctions against the actual refineries, and I know that they've chosen one at this stage, but this ship that's arrived here off Perth is from Jamnagar. What do you know about Jamnagar, the refinery there?
Oh, well, the Jamnagar refinery is the biggest refinery in the world. Yes, it's run by Reliance Industries, which is a huge petrochemical and other various goods company. I assume Australian listeners are familiar with Reliance, but if you're not, you'll also be keen to know that the refinery itself, in its complex, has an annual rescue and rehabilitation center, which has also had its own share of controversies. The least of them being the fact that there are animals being housed in the confines of a refinery complex. The refinery's usage of Russian crude has risen significantly since the invasion of Ukraine. In the first 6 months of this year, half of the crude it has sourced has been from Russia. There's been about a 50% increase in their imports of Russian crude over the last year, a 30% year-on-year increase in the first half of this year itself. It's fairly obvious that they're going for cheaper Russian oil, and they're finding willing buyers who don't care where the oil really comes from and don't really have any ethical qualms about buying products from them.
Right. But I suppose the Australian government should have some ethical qualms about whether or not they're being duped by refineries processing Russian oil in India. They should be thinking more about that.
Well, I wouldn't use the word duped here, simply because I firmly believe that the Australian government is aware of this, because this is a very clearly stated part of the legislation. This is a significant loophole in the existing policy, where it says that crude, any oil products refined from Russian crude do not fall under these sanctions. When they wrote this legislation, they presumably thought about it, except they didn't think about how it would benefit Russia. So I don't think it would be accurate to use the word duped, simply because that would suggest that the refineries that are sending the oil are at fault, wherein they're doing what any business would do, which is gleaning profit from a mechanism that allows you to glean profit.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, though, Vaibhav, the question is, why doesn't India take part in some of these sanctions?
Well, India has had long-standing relationships with Russia. It has traditionally and historically been part of a non-aligned movement, even in the Cold War, where it's traded with the West, with Russia equally. It sources its crude not just from Russia, it also gets supplies from different parts of the globe. And again, it's the same quandary, which is the Indian oil minister has said that they're buying Russian oil because A, it's cheap, and second, because if they don't, then global oil prices will rise up. I'm not sure about the latter, but I do understand the primary factor being that there is cheap oil available in the market. There are volumes that are unaccounted for, so they're going to make their profit any way they seem fit.
All right, well, we'll watch with interest. As I said, we've got a ship here that's sort of stirred up a bit of interest here in Western Australia about this whole issue, and I thank you very much for going through it with us.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure. Vaibhav Raghunandan there, who is an EU-Russia analyst, talking through what their research into Russian oil is saying.